The wind howled across the empty plains of the cold planet Varela. Jaren sat near the fire in his small wooden cabin, sipping a warm drink. He had been living alone for 2 years now, farming alien roots and trading them for supplies. Life was quiet. A little boring, but safe. That night, the storm outside was stronger than usual, shaking the windows and rattling the roof. Jaren had just added more wood to the fire when he heard it, a soft knock at the door. He paused, confused. No one ever visited him this far out, especially not during a storm. The knock came again, this time louder, followed by a weak voice. "Please. Someone. Help." Jaren stood up slowly, grabbing the old plasma tool he kept near the wall. He opened the door a few inches and peered outside. What he saw made him freeze. A tall alien woman stood there, soaked from the rain, her clothes torn and clinging to her body. In her arms, she held 2 small alien children. Shivering and weak, the woman looked up at him with glowing violet eyes, full of pain and fear. "Please, they're hungry." "Let us in," she whispered. Jaren's first instinct was to say no, to close the door and lock it. But something in her eyes stopped him, something desperate and honest. He stepped back and opened the door fully. "Come in," he said softly. Quickly, the alien woman hurried inside, holding the children close. They were thin, their faces pale and tired. The woman sank to her knees near the fire. Placing the children on a worn-out rug, Jaren handed her a blanket, and she wrapped it around them. He watched in silence as the kids huddled together, slowly warming up. "What happened to you?" he finally asked. The woman looked at him but didn't answer. Her lips trembled as she said, "No food, no shelter. My mate is gone." Her voice cracked, and she looked away, ashamed. Jaren brought them some food, old bread and thick root soup. The children ate quickly, as if they hadn't eaten in days. The woman didn't eat, she just watched them, a faint smile on her face. Then she looked at Jaren again, this time with something else in her eyes. Hope maybe, or something deeper. "My name is Kora," she said quietly. "These are my sons." "They have no one but me," Jaren nodded slowly. "I'm Jaren. This is my farm." He didn't ask more questions. He could see she was too tired to explain. Instead, he added more wood to the fire and sat nearby. Still watching them closely, Kora stared into the flames, her face calm but unreadable. The storm outside grew louder, wind screaming like angry ghosts. Inside the cabin, though, there was warmth. The children slowly curled up and fell asleep, wrapped in the blanket. Kora remained awake, sitting quietly, her eyes now focused on Jaren. "Why did you help us?" she asked suddenly. Jaren blinked, surprised by the question. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "Maybe I just couldn't leave you out there." She nodded, then whispered something in her native language. A soft word that sounded like a prayer. Jaren didn't understand, but he felt it meant something important. Later that night, when the fire was low and the storm outside had calmed a little, Kora stood up. She walked to the door and looked outside into the dark, then closed it and locked it. When she turned around, she met Jaren's eyes again. "I have no place to go," she said. "No tribe, no future. Unless..." "Unless?" Jaren asked carefully. Kora stepped closer, her voice gentle but serious. "Unless you let us stay. Unless you make us yours." Jaren felt his heart skip, confused by her words. "What do you mean?" he asked. Kora lowered her head, her voice barely a whisper now. "In my people's law, a widow with no protector must ask for bonding. You took us in, fed my children. Now I ask, will you accept us as yours?" Jaren was stunned. He looked at the sleeping children, then at Kora. This wasn't just about food and shelter. It was about something sacred in her culture. He didn't know the rules or what bonding meant exactly. But one thing was clear: Kora had come to him not only with hunger, but with a wish to be safe, to be accepted, to belong. He didn't answer right away, but deep in his heart, something shifted. Maybe this night wasn't just a storm. Maybe it was the beginning of something he never expected. The knock at midnight had changed everything. Jaran couldn't sleep that night. He lay on his bed, staring at the wooden ceiling while the fire in the corner crackled low. The storm outside had passed, but a different storm now lived inside his mind. Who was this alien widow really? And what did she mean by "make us yours"? Kelra and the children slept near the fireplace, bundled under old blankets. She hadn't asked for anything more. But her words still echoed in Jaren's ears. In her eyes, he had seen something more than survival, a kind of plea one that went beyond food or shelter. As morning broke, Jaren stepped outside, the ground wet and heavy with last night's rain. The skies were gray, and the wind was gentle now. He gathered tools for the day's work, but found himself glancing back toward the house often. Something inside him was changing, and he didn't know what to do with it. Later, Kalra joined him quietly in the field. Her movements light and graceful. She didn't speak, just helped him plant root seeds and gather herbs. The children stayed near the house, playing with sticks and chasing each other. Their laughter made the air feel warmer during a break. Jaren handed Kalra a cup of water. She took it with both hands and gave a small nod. "I am thankful," she said softly. "My sons have not laughed in many moons." Jaren watched her, trying to understand her more. "You said your mate was gone." He asked what happened to him. Kelra froze for a second, then slowly sat down on a large rock, her eyes lowered, filled with memories. "He was taken," she whispered, "by the flesh hunters." Jaren's heart tightened. He had heard of them, wild alien raiders who fed on the weak. "They came to our camp," she continued. "They burned our tents, stole our food. They took many, including him." She looked up at Jaren, and for the first time her eyes weren't just sad, they were haunted. "I ran with my children. We hid in the mud tunnels for 3 days." Her voice trembled, but she kept going. "When we came out, everything was gone." Jaren sat beside her, unsure of what to say. Kalra wiped a tear from her cheek. "We wandered for cycles, begging for help, but no tribe would accept us." "Why?" Jaren asked gently. She turned her face away, her voice sharp with pain. "I was marked," Jaren frowned. "Marked?" Kelra pulled back her shoulder cloth and revealed a glowing symbol just below her neck. It pulsed gently with faint red light. "It is a widow's curse," she said. "In my culture, once a mate dies, the female carries his bond scar. If she does not bond again soon, she is hunted." "Hunted? By who?" Jaren asked, confused. "By the flesh hunters," she whispered. "They smell the unbonded mark. They consider us weak, unclaimed." Jaren's stomach turned. "So, by sheltering you," he said slowly, "I put myself in danger?" Kalra looked at him, her eyes full of sorrow. "Yes," she said. "But also, we have no one else, and now you are the first to not turn us away." The children called for her then, their small voices echoing across the field. She stood and bowed her head slightly. "I do not ask for pity, human. Only a chance to live." As she walked back to the house, Jaren stood frozen. He looked at the dirt under his feet, the sky above him, and the strange feeling inside his chest. He had just learned that by offering help, he had accepted danger, but strangely, he didn't regret it. That night, Jaren sat with Kalra near the fire again. The children were asleep once more. Curled beside the warmth, Kalra stirred a pot of root stew and handed him a bowl. "I made this the way my people do," she said, with a small smile. Jaren tasted it. It was rich, smoky, and oddly sweet. "Not bad," he said, smiling back. They sat in silence for a while, but the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was soft, like quiet understanding. "Kelra," Jaren said, looking into the fire, "if I agreed to bond, what does that mean for me?" She looked at him carefully. "You become more than protector," she said. "You become life father. To them and to me," Jaren swallowed hard. "And if I don't?" "Then we must leave soon." "Before they find us," she replied without anger. Only truth. The fire crackled, throwing flickers of orange light across her face. She looked both strong and fragile at once, a warrior with a wounded heart. Jaren looked at the sleeping children again. They were peaceful now, but for how long? Was he really ready to become part of their lives? Was he ready to be hunted? For a family he just met. But then Kalra's voice came again, soft and steady. Your eyes are kind, Jaren, and your soul feels strong. If you walk away, I will understand, but if you stay, you will not walk alone. Jaren didn't speak, but deep in his chest, something began to settle, not fear, not doubt, but something closer to purpose. The wind had changed again. It no longer carried the soft cold of winter, it carried tension. Jaren felt it in his bones, in the stillness of the animals, and in the silence that hung over the hills. Kalra felt it too. She stood at the edge of the field one morning, eyes fixed on the horizon, her body frozen like stone. They're close, she whispered, barely loud enough to hear. Jaren walked over, carrying a basket of harvested roots. Who? He asked, though deep inside, he already knew. Kalra didn't answer. Her hand moved to the small of her neck, where the widow's mark glowed faintly. It hadn't glowed in days. But now, it pulsed slow and red, like a heartbeat of warning. That night, Kalra refused to let the children sleep near the windows. She moved their bedding to the cellar and stacked barrels near the door. Jaren watched, realizing that this woman, who had once seemed gentle and broken, was now something else. A mother ready to fight for her cubs. They follow the scent of my scar, she said, voice sharp. They track it from miles away. But it grows stronger when I am near fear. Then don't be afraid, Jaren said quietly. Kalra looked at him with a tired smile. It's not that easy, she said. But I will try. Jaren spent the next day reinforcing the house. He placed metal sheets over the windows, locked the outer barn door, and set up simple traps in the yard. He used what little tech he had left: motion sensors, fire beacons, sound alarms. But in his heart, he knew if they truly came, all these things might only buy him minutes, not safety. Later, while checking the barn, Jaren found one of the traps had been triggered. A small creature lay nearby, injured but alive. Its skin was oily and gray, its eyes large and black. It wasn't one of Kalra's kind, and it wasn't from any peaceful species he knew. It was a scout. He ran back to the cabin, breath heavy. Kalra met him at the door, already holding a blade carved from bone. They've sent scouts, he said. They're testing the farm. Kalra closed her eyes for a moment, as if listening to a sound deep inside her. Then she nodded. They're coming tonight, she said. They always wait for darkness. Jaren looked at her, his voice steady but tight. Then we fight. Kalra hesitated. If we fight, they will return in greater numbers, she warned. If we run, we might lose them. But where will you go? Jaren asked, with 2 small children. No tribe will take you. Not with that mark. She lowered her head, her voice barely above a whisper. That is why I asked you to bond. If you become our protector in name and spirit, they might back away. You will be seen as a claimed territory. Jaren's fists clenched. I never wanted to be in the middle of some ancient alien rule, he muttered. But I can't let them hurt you. Or the boys. He turned to the sleeping children, safe for now in the cellar. They had started calling him Day in their own tongue. It melted something inside him every time. They trusted him. They believed he was strong enough to keep them safe. Kalra placed a hand on his arm. I know I ask for much, she said, but in my world, there is no room for half decisions. You must choose: run, fight, or bond fully. Jaren looked at her, at the scar glowing under her skin, the fear in her eyes and the strength behind it. He nodded slowly. Then let's fight tonight. And after that, we'll talk about bonding. Night fell fast. The wind screamed again, and the stars above hid behind thick clouds. Jaren stood near the barn, armed with a pulse rifle and a blade he hadn't used in years. Kalra moved like a shadow through the yard, setting fire traps and whispering strange words that made the air hum. Then it came, a loud screech from the woods, followed by crashing branches and clawed footsteps. Shapes moved in the dark, thin, long-limbed, fast. 3 of them ran toward the cabin, their teeth shining in the firelight. Jaren fired once, hitting one in the leg. It screeched and rolled over. But the others kept coming. Kalra leaped into the air with a cry, slashing down one of the beasts with her bone blade. Blood sprayed across the snow, dark and steaming. The 3rd one made it to the door. Claws raised, but Jaren tackled it from behind. He slammed it into the wall, knife pressed to its throat. "Leave," he growled, "or die." The creature hissed, eyes wild, then twisted and fled into the dark. Silence returned slowly, the wind dying down, the night still. Kalra stood beside him, panting, her blade dripping. "They'll come back," she said. "But they'll remember this fight." Jaren looked at her, then at the children peeking from the cellar door. Eyes wide, he dropped his weapon, breathing heavily. "You said they'll leave bonded ones alone?" he asked. Kalra nodded slowly. "Yes. But only if the bond is true." Jaren stepped closer. "Then tomorrow we make it true." Morning came cold and quiet. The fields outside were marked with blood and footprints from the night before. Jaren stood near the well, washing his hands slowly, his eyes distant. Last night changed everything. He was no longer just a farmer. He had made a promise, and in Kalra's world, promises held deep meaning inside the cabin. Kalra prepared something strange, small bowls filled with thick green paste. Lines of dried herbs, glowing stones, and a curved silver blade lay on the table. The children sat nearby, wide-eyed but silent. Sensing the day was important, Kalra turned when she heard Jaren step in. Her expression was calm, but her hands trembled slightly as she touched the bowl. "You're sure?" she asked softly. Jaren nodded. "I told you, if it keeps them safe." "I'll do it." Kalra walked to him, holding out a simple cloth robe dyed with her people's colors. "Wear this," she said. "It marks you as willing." Jaren took the robe and stepped into the back room to change. As he dressed, he couldn't help but wonder, what did this ritual mean for his future? Would he truly become their father? Would Kalra be his mate? His wife? When he returned, Kalra had drawn a large circle on the wooden floor using the glowing paste. Symbols surrounded it, alien words he couldn't read. She motioned for him to kneel inside the circle. Then she and the children joined him, forming a triangle. Kalra began chanting in a low, melodic voice. The air around them grew warmer, and the glowing marks on her arms began to shine. Jaren felt something shift deep inside, like an invisible thread was being pulled. Not painful, but heavy. Kalra raised the silver blade, her voice steady. "This ritual is of breath, of blood, of bond," she said. "Speak your truth, Jaren of Earth." Jaren took a deep breath. "I don't know your ways, but I know this. I want to protect you and your sons. I will care for them as if they were mine. I will stand between danger and your door, and I will never turn away." Kalra nodded, tears shining in her eyes. She made a small cut on her palm with the blade, letting a drop of dark blood fall into one of the bowls. Then she handed the blade to Jaren. Without fear, he did the same, cutting his palm and letting his blood mix with hers. As the 2 drops touched, the paste in the bowl flashed bright gold, then turned black. Kalra reached into the bowl and drew a line across Jaren's forehead, then one across her own. Lastly, she marked the children, who didn't flinch or move away. "From this moment," Kalra whispered, "we are bound. Your spirit holds ours, and ours hold yours." Suddenly, Jaren felt warmth rush through his chest, like the warmth of sunlight after years of winter. His head felt light, and memories not his own brushed against his mind. He saw images Kalra's past, her tribe, her mate, her fear, her loneliness. He also saw himself through her eyes, strong, kind, chosen. The glow around them faded, but something deep remained. The children stood and ran into Jaren's arms, laughing softly. "Da," one whispered. "You feel like home now." Jaren hugged them both, feeling something deep click into place. This was no longer a temporary shelter. This was a family later. As they ate together, Jaren noticed a new mark had appeared on his wrist shaped like the widow's scar Kalra carried, but his glowed faint blue, not red. She smiled as she saw it. "You are bonded," she said. "Fully and truly, now they. Hunters will sense it. They may test you again. But they will not see us as prey." Jaren looked at the children, who now played happily near the hearth. "What happens next?" he asked. Kalra sat beside him, her expression peaceful but serious. "Now we live as one. We share food, space, and sleep. You are father, protector, mate." Jaren hesitated at the last word. "Mate?" he echoed, unsure. Kalra met his gaze calmly. "Yes," she said, "if your heart allows it. Not all bonds become love, but this bond already carries pieces of it." Jaren said nothing for a long while. He simply watched the fire, feeling the warmth of Kalra beside him. He didn't know if he loved her yet, but he knew he would never let her go. Outside, the wind had returned, but this time, it sounded different, not like a threat, but like a warning to those who might come near. This home was protected now. This family was no longer alone, and deep in the forest, something watched and waited. The wind blew harder that night, carrying the scent of ash and broken leaves. Jaren stood at the edge of the field, gripping his rifle. The stars above were hidden behind thick clouds, making the world feel darker than usual. Kalra stood beside him, her long hair tied back, her glowing marks now brighter than ever. Something was coming, and they both felt it. The bonding had given them more than protection. It had awakened something ancient. Kalra could now sense the enemy long before their feet touched the ground. She turned her head toward the distant forest and whispered, "They are near." The children were already hidden deep in the cellar, wrapped in warm blankets and told not to make a sound. Jaren had sealed the hatch with thick boards and metal bars. This time, he would not let the monsters get close. "Will they attack tonight?" he asked. Kalra nodded slowly. "They must test the bond. If it is strong, they might leave. If it is weak, they will destroy us." Jaren checked the traps again, spiked pits near the barn, motion lights, sound alarms. He had also rigged barrels of flammable oil to explode if needed. He had turned his peaceful farm into a battleground. Kalra moved silently between the shadows, whispering words from her old tongue. Small runes lit up on the walls of the house, symbols of defense. "They cannot be killed like normal beasts," she said. "Their skin resists metal, but not fire or sound." Jaren nodded, gripping the detonator in his hand tighter. He wasn't a soldier, but tonight he would fight like one. Then it started, a low growl from the forest, followed by loud thudding footsteps. The ground trembled slightly as the enemy approached. 6 tall figures appeared from the dark thin gray, with sharp claws and glowing red eyes. Jaren felt fear rise in his chest, but he held his ground. Kalra stepped beside him, her blade glowing, her eyes fierce. The first creature moved forward, testing the boundary of the traps. It snarled and leapt, landing directly on one of the fire barrels. Jaren hit the detonator, and a burst of flame shot into the air. The creature screamed and rolled, its body burning. The others hissed and backed away, now aware that this fight would cost them. But they didn't leave. They were here for the bond. They needed to see if Jaren would truly defend what was now his. Another beast rushed the barn, but it triggered a sound trap. High-pitched waves blasted through the air, and the creature dropped. Clawing at its ears, Kalra ran toward it, leapt into the air, and drove her bone blade into its chest. The creature let out one last scream, then fell still. Jaren turned just in time to block an attack from behind. A third raider had climbed over the roof, landing silently. It slashed at him, tearing his robe. But missing his skin, he rolled away, grabbed his blade, and slashed upward, catching the beast across the arm. The creature roared in rage, but Jaren didn't back down. He remembered Kalra's words, "Don't fight with fear, fight with fire and will." As the beast lunged again, Jaren threw a flash stone into its mouth. The explosion was small, but enough to knock it back. Stunned, Kelra appeared behind it and finished the job with one clean strike. 3 remained, circling the house like wolves. One tried to break through the cellar door, sniffing the scent of the children. Jaren shouted and ran toward it, drawing its attention. It turned, angry, and charged. Jaren raised his rifle and fired 3 rounds into its leg. It stumbled, falling into one of the deep pits he had dug earlier. Spikes pierced its body, and it wailed before falling silent. The last 2 beasts stood together, watching Jaren and Kelra. They didn't move, they just stared. Kelra stepped forward, raising her hands from her palms. The bonding marks glowed, casting light across the yard. "This one is claimed," she shouted in her language. "He is not prey, he is bonded, he is protector and mate." The beasts growled lowly but did not advance. They stared at Jaren, sniffing the air, and then slowly, they turned and disappeared into the trees. Silence returned. Only the crackling of small fires and the heavy breathing of Jaren and Kelra filled the night. "They believed us," Jaren whispered, collapsing to his knees. Kelra knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. "You fought with heart," she said. "And now they know. This family is not weak." Jaren rested his head against hers, his body aching. The battle was over. The bond had been tested, and it had held strong. From the cellar, the faint voices of the children called out, "Da, Ma, is it safe?" Jaren smiled, tears mixing with sweat and dirt on his face. "Yes," he called back. "It's safe now. We're still here together." And in that moment, under the smoky sky, Jaren knew he was no longer just a farmer on a forgotten planet. He was father, protector, mate, and he would never let anything take that away. The next morning, soft golden light touched the farm like a blessing. Snow on the rooftops melted slowly, and the air smelled clean, like fresh earth and firewood. Jaren stood on the porch, arms crossed, staring at the horizon. His body ached from the night's battle, but his heart was calm. Inside the cabin, Kelra fed the children warm stew, humming a song from her tribe. The boys laughed quietly, sitting close to her, their small hands eager for the food. They looked stronger now, not just in body, but in spirit. They had seen fear, but also love. They had seen a human man fight for them, bleed for them, and win. When Jaren entered the cabin, the children ran to him, wrapping their arms around his legs. "Da!" One cried, "You made the monsters run." Jaren smiled, picking both of them up. "I had help," he said, glancing toward Kelra. She smiled back, her eyes soft, but glowing with pride. "You stood like a warrior," she said, handing him a cup of herbal tea. He took it, nodded, then sat by the fire, his legs finally giving in. That evening, something beautiful happened. A ship from a nearby outpost hovered above the farm. It was a trade scout curious after detecting energy spikes. From the battle, 2 humans stepped out, both surprised to find life this deep in wild territory. "You're still alive out here?" One asked Jaren, laughing nervously. "We thought this region was full of raiders." "It was," Jaren replied simply. "But not anymore." The traders stayed for a meal, eating stew with wide eyes. They stared at Kelra, then at the children, then back at Jaren. One of them leaned close and whispered, "You bonded with her?" Jaren nodded slowly. "Yes, I did." The trader raised his eyebrows, but said nothing more. Instead, he offered to include Jaren's farm in the outer trade route again. "It's safer now, thanks to you," he said. "And stories like yours, they travel fast." When the ship left, Kelra stood beside Jaren, watching the smoke trail vanish into the sky. "Do you regret bonding?" she asked quietly. Jaren looked at her, then down at his sons playing in the snow. "No," he said with a smile. "I've never been more sure of anything." Over the next few weeks, life bloomed again. Kelra planted new herbs behind the cabin. Using old methods from her homeworld, Jaren taught the boys how to hold tools, how to spot weather signs, how to fix broken fences. They called him Dad, without hesitation now, their voices full of trust every night. The family sat around the fire, eating, talking, laughing. Sometimes Kalra would tell stories dailies. Of her people, of lost stars, of love that bent time. Other nights, Jaren would hum old Earth songs, and Kalra would lean her head on his shoulder. One day, Kalra handed Jaren a small object wrapped in cloth. When he opened it, he found a handmade pendant carved from bone and crystal. Its design matched the mark on her shoulder, but with one difference. His name was carved into it, written in her language. "What is this?" he asked, touching it gently. "It's a bond token," she replied. "Only given to one who is chosen not just by tradition, but by heart." Jaren placed the pendant around his neck. The moment he did, a soft warmth passed through his chest. Kalra's eyes lit up. "Now your soul glows in my world," she whispered, "and mine in yours." Later that night, as they sat watching the flames dance in the hearth, Kalra spoke again. "In our way, once a bond is accepted in soul and spirit, it becomes eternal. Not even death can undo it." Jaren looked at her, the fire reflecting in her eyes. "And you're sure you want that with me?" he asked. Kalra reached over, placing her hand over his heart. "You gave my children a father," she said. "You gave me safety, but more than that. You gave me hope again. Yes, I want this. You're not just a human, Jaren. You're our future." Tears touched the corners of Jaren's eyes. He pulled her close, their foreheads touching. No more words were needed. Outside, snow began to fall. Again, gently covering the land in white. But inside that small cabin, there was warmth. There was laughter. There was a bond stronger than blood. Jaren had once lived alone, far from people, far from love. Now he had a family, a purpose, and a name that meant something more. He was a protector, a mate, a father. And no storm, no raider, no darkness could ever take that away. The snow melted slowly that season. Spring touched the fields like a soft breath, and new life began to grow again. Jaren walked across the land with Kalra by his side, her hand gently resting in his. The two boys ran ahead, chasing glowing insects that danced through the air like sparks. The farm was no longer just a shelter, it was a home. A sacred place where a broken alien family had been reborn, and where a lonely man found everything he never knew he needed. One afternoon, as Jaren repaired the barn roof, he spotted a small shuttle approaching from the sky. It was painted in Earth colors, white and blue, with a shining crest that showed it belonged to the Human Frontier Division. Jaren climbed down slowly and called Kalra. She came quickly, her eyes filled with quiet worry. "We knew this day might come," she said softly. He nodded, gripping her hand gently. "Let's face it together." The shuttle landed near the old windmill, and two officials stepped out, both wearing clean uniforms and curious expressions. "Jaren Holt?" one asked, scanning a small device. "Yes," Jaren replied, standing tall. "You've been off-grid for nearly 3 years," the officer said, frowning slightly. "We detected unusual energy surges in this region, and strange bonding signals from a non-human tribe." Jaren didn't flinch. "I stayed off-grid for peace, but I didn't expect to find a family." The second officer looked at Kalra, then at the boys who now stood behind her, peeking from the door. "You bonded with an alien widow?" he asked, almost in disbelief. "And adopted her children?" "Yes," Jaren said simply. "They're mine now, by spirit, by law, and by heart." The officers exchanged glances. "Well," the first one said, "it's unusual, but not illegal." He stepped forward, offering a small card. "We're reactivating trade routes here. You'll receive supply access, emergency services, and updates from Earth." Jaren took the card but didn't look at it. He was watching Kalra, who stood calmly, her hand resting on the boy's shoulders. The officer followed his gaze, then added, "You could return, you know. Earth always has room for one of its own." Jaren shook his head. "I already returned, not to Earth, but to purpose." The officers didn't argue. Instead, they nodded politely, made a few notes on their devices, and returned to their shuttle. As the ship lifted into the sky, Kalra walked to Jaran, her eyes filled with emotion. "You didn't even think about it?" she asked gently. "I did," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Years ago, before I met you, before I saw two hungry boys clinging to their mother's side, before I knew what it meant to be needed." Kalra leaned into him, her voice trembling. "We are yours now, Jaran. And you are ours." That night, under a clear sky full of stars, the family sat around the fire. Kalra prepared a special meal, her tribe's bonding feast. Filled with spices and roots they had grown together, the boys gave Jaran hand-carved gifts, small wooden figures shaped like him and Kalra. They laughed, told stories, and watched sparks rise from the fire like glowing wishes. Jaran stood up, raised his cup, and looked at each of them. "I used to think love was something quiet, something soft, but now I know love is loud. It fights, it protects, it grows even in the coldest places." Kalra stood with him, their foreheads touching. "You are not alone anymore," she whispered. "Your love changed us all. You chose us. Even when you could have walked away." The stars above seemed to shine brighter, as if listening. The trees swayed in the gentle wind, and the earth beneath their feet pulsed with warmth. Jaran was no longer just a visitor to this world. He was part of its story now, a human who didn't run from danger, a man who said yes to the bond, a protector who made a promise and kept it. From nearby villages and scattered outposts, stories of the bonded human spread quickly. Some called him foolish, others called him brave. But to Kalra and the boys, he was simply ours, and in the quiet, between the stars and the soil, that was all that mattered. Love had no species, family had no rules, and a man who once lived in silence now lived with laughter echoing in every room. The human who chose to love had changed everything, forever.